The weakness of your mortality cannot cut you out. The challenges of your background cannot disqualify you. Your foundation cannot be a gate against you. Your ignorance cannot be a limiting factor. For mercy speaks today. Light breaks upon us and we enter into the place of our ordination. There is something higher, there is something stronger, and nothing of darkness can stop it. Nothing of man can stop it. Even the weaknesses that we carry in our vessel is not enough. If you don't fix me, where else can I go? Nowhere. There is no elder brother to run to. You are the elder brother. Some of you, your parents are no more alive. You can't look up to the hills, for help cannot come from there. There is he that lives beyond the hills. The earth is his footstool. The heavens is his throne. We have to lift our eyes to Zion. Only from there. And whatever it takes for God to bring your eyes to behold him that sits in the sides of the north, he will do it. That is when you have entered into the place of destiny. That is when your calling has begun to speak. That is when your destiny has been activated. That is when what you carry from eternity has come into its own. If not, all the days you live upon the face of the earth is like wasted days. The days that didn't count, the days that didn't matter, the days that is numbered in Satan, numbered in darkness, numbered in confusion, numbered in sickness, numbered in poverty, numbered in lack, numbered in ignorance, numbered in darkness. But today you come to light. Not by the energy of man. It is an act of God. From eternity, mercy spoke one more time and engineered our steps to the places that can drive us and bring us into our ordination. We are not strong in ourselves. We are not able in ourselves. But somehow God broke into our space. He began to act on matter, act on circumstances, act on men, act on our heart, act on our choices, act on our desires. And suddenly we found our place where we never dreamed we will be. But that is the place of destiny. How did we get there? It is an act of God. It is eternity entering into time. There is something that your destiny carries. There is a purpose that you carry. There is something strong that you must deliver. And all the places that you have found yourself, that is not where God has ordained. By the hand of God, you are brought into a place of alignment. You will no more stay away. You will no more hear the cry of God to Adam in the garden of Eden. He said, Adam, where are you? That is a man that has left his estate. That is a man that has left the position that God has ordained for him, the seat of destiny that is allotted to him, the office of his calling, the place of his ranking, the place of his operation, the power of his ordination. He is out of alignment, but the heavens calls. My daughter, will you come back? There is something our generation will miss if you do not come into alignment. There is something. There is no other person within our ranks that carry that ability. That ability is an endowment of heaven into your vessel. No matter how strong other men are, there is something unique. There is something special. There is something powerful. There is something from heaven. You are the one that carries it. You are the one that embodies it. But Satan is fighting. Darkness wants to take you out. But tonight I see a troop coming back. They are coming back to the place that God ordained for them. Their taste has been touched by God. There is a baptism that came upon them. Their hearts has been torn. They have been aligned to the desires of God. The scripture said that in the days of Elijah, that the spirit of Elijah, it has a capacity. The capacity of the spirit of Elijah is to turn the hearts of the children to their fathers. There is a desire of God in heaven, but men live upon the face of the earth. They don't mind the desire of God. They don't care about the burdens of the heavens. They live as if their life is their own. But there is a cry, there is a spirit, there is an outpouring, there is a dragging, a pull, a summon, a call, something flowing from the throne, something summoning us, something changing us. It is a pulling to the place of destiny, to the place that God saw before you came upon the face of the earth. God's scripture speaking to Jeremiah, he said, before you entered your mother's womb, I knew thee. It was there that I ordained thee a prophet unto nations. The weakness of your mortality cannot cut you out. The challenges of your background cannot disqualify you. Your foundation cannot be a gate against you. Your ignorance cannot be a limiting factor. For mercy speaks today. Light breaks upon us and we enter into the place of our ordination. There is something higher, there is something stronger, and nothing of darkness can stop it. Nothing of man can stop it. Even the weaknesses that we carry in our vessel is not enough. I see a light in the spirit, for the Lord has opened my eyes, and I see as it were a light in the spirit, and men of like passion, they are being drawn, they are being wooed, they are being summoned by that light. The scripture said that there is a light, that great light, a light that lighted every man that cometh upon the face of the earth. There is a light that I carry. There is a destiny I must fulfill. There is a light I carry. There is something about my life. There is a calling I must fulfill. I step into it. I will not be stopped. I will not be hindered. There is a force by which I am called. There is an energy that is back of my destiny. I enter into that energy. I walk in the highways of destiny. I come into my home. The powers of my ordination are activated. The resources of my destiny comes to me. I walk in power. Sidaka Pretekataka Papena Sidaka Papendo Shataka Patelia Ratapapante Katekapo Zilakatakapama Ambretekapapandelia Shatakapapatakape Pretekatakapo Azetekapabambe Oh, for the path of the just is like a shining light. The path of the just is like a shining light. There is a light you have stepped into. It's an eternal light. There is a light you have stepped into. It's the light of your ordination. There is a light you have stepped into. It's the light of your purpose. There is a light you have stepped into. It's the light of your calling. The path of the just is like a shining light. When he pushes it a little, it shines brighter. When a man sprays upon it, it shines brighter. When he presses towards it, it shines brighter. When he yields himself, it shines brighter. When he obeys, it shines brighter. When he consecrates, it shines brighter. The path of the just is like a light. I see a light. I see a light. Oh my God. The path of the just is like an ever-increasing light. It's like an excellent ambience in the spirit. It's like an ever-increasing glory. Something that cannot be stopped by darkness. Something that cannot be tampered by the forces of the enemy. Something that keeps increasing. It keeps increasing. It keeps increasing. It keeps increasing. It keeps increasing. The path of the just